I'm a land surveyor. I've spent 15 years walking through woods most people will never see, measuring property lines in places where the trees grow so thick, noon looks like dusk. I don't believe in hauntings. At least, I didn't. Not until October of 2022, when I took a job in Franklin County, Alabama. What I found in those woods changed everything I thought I knew about the dark. And I need to tell someone, because the family who hired me, they haven't answered their phone in 3 weeks. The job seemed routine at first. A family named Holbrook had purchased 47 acres of undeveloped land about 6 miles outside of Russellville. Old timber property that hadn't been surveyed since 1958. They wanted updated boundary markers before breaking ground on a cabin. A retirement dream, the wife told me over the phone. Margaret Holbrook, sweet woman, 63 years old. She laughed when she warned me about the terrain. The realtor said there's some structures back in there, she'd said. Old hunting camps or something. Don't let them spook you. I remember thinking, lady, I've surveyed property with active meth labs. A few rotting deer stands aren't going to bother me. I was so sure of myself. I drove out on a Tuesday morning, October 11th. The weather had just started to turn. That particular smell was in the air. You know the one. Decomposing leaves and cold earth and something sweet underneath. The smell of things dying so other things can grow. The access road to the property was barely a road at all, more like a suggestion. 2 ruts carved through overgrown grass, winding back into timber that looked like it hadn't been thinned in decades. My truck barely fit. The Holbrooks had given me GPS coordinates for where they wanted to meet me, a clearing about a quarter mile in where they'd already started storing materials, lumber, concrete bags, a generator still wrapped in plastic. But when I got there, no one was waiting. I checked my phone. No signal. Not unusual for this part of the state. Franklin County has dead zones the size of small towns. So I waited. 20 minutes passed, then 40. I started to get annoyed. I'd driven 2 hours for this job, and time is money. So I figured, to hell with it. I'd start the survey myself, work the eastern boundary first, then circle back. If they showed up, they showed up. I grabbed my equipment and headed into the trees. The first hour was unremarkable. I moved through the forest, marking points, taking measurements, doing the work I've done 1,000 times before. The land was beautiful, actually. Old growth hardwoods, a creek cutting through the southeast corner with water so clear you could count the stones at the bottom. I understood why the Holbrooks wanted to build here, but around 11:30, I started noticing something strange. The sounds had stopped. Now. I need you to understand something. Woods are never quiet. There's always something. Birds, insects, wind through branches, squirrels arguing in the canopy. It's a constant layered noise that your brain eventually filters into background static. When it stops, you notice. It's like someone pressing mute on a television. Sudden, total, wrong. I stood there with my transit pole in one hand, and I listened. Nothing. Not a single bird, not a single insect. Just my own breathing, and somewhere, far off, a sound I couldn't quite identify. Low, rhythmic, almost like humming. I told myself it was the wind. Wind can do strange things in valleys, create sounds that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. I'd heard it before on other jobs, acoustic tricks that can make you feel watched when you're completely alone, but the trees weren't moving. There was no wind. I checked my compass, adjusted my bearing, told myself I was being ridiculous and kept working. But the humming didn't stop. If anything, it seemed to be getting closer. I found the first structure around noon. It was set back from the creek, half hidden by a stand of pine trees that had grown up around it like a cage. A cabin. Old. Single room from the look of it, with a door that hung crooked on its hinges and windows that were just holes in the wall. No glass, no shutters. The wood was gray with age. The roof had partially collapsed, leaving a gap that led in a single shaft of pale light. And on the door, someone had carved something. I moved closer, my boots crunching through dead leaves that seemed too loud, too crisp. The carving was crude but deliberate. Letters gouged deep into the wood with what must have been a knife. They spelled out 2 words. Don't sleep. That was it. No punctuation, no explanation, just a warning, carved into a door in the middle of nowhere. I told myself it was old, probably from decades ago, some hunter's idea of a joke, or maybe a genuine warning about bears or snakes, or any of the 100 things that can kill you in the Alabama backcountry. But I took a photo anyway, and I noticed the carving wasn't weathered like the rest of the door. The exposed wood inside the letters was lighter, newer. That carving wasn't decades old. It might have been weeks. I should have turned back then. I know that now. Every rational instinct I had was telling me to pack up my equipment, drive back to Russellville, and call the Holbrooks from somewhere with actual cell service. But I didn't, because I'm a professional, and professionals finish jobs. God, I was so stupid. The cabin's interior was empty. I only looked for a second, just long enough to confirm there was nothing inside but dirt and old leaves, and the skeleton of what might have been a cot in one corner. But the smell hit me the moment I opened the door. Not rot, not decay, something else, something sweeter and more chemical, like burnt sugar and copper. I backed away, told myself it was probably an animal that had died under the floorboards, told myself a lot of things. And then I noticed the footprints. They led away from the cabin, through the leaves, toward the denser timber to the north, fresh footprints, bare feet. And here's the thing that made my stomach drop. They were walking backward. I've tracked enough game to know what forward motion looks like. The way weight transfers from heel to toe, the depth patterns, the spacing. These prints were wrong. The impressions were deeper at the toes, lighter at the heels. Whoever, or whatever, had made them had been walking in reverse, away from the cabin, toward the woods, where the humming was coming from. You might think you know where this is going. I thought I did too. I thought, okay, there's someone out here, someone weird, someone who lives off-grid and doesn't want visitors. Maybe mentally ill, maybe just a hermit, but human. Explainable. I could deal with explainable, so I made a decision. I'd finish surveying the eastern boundary, skip the northern section entirely, and get the hell out. I'd call the Holbrooks from town, explain that there was someone living on the property, recommend they contact local authorities before any construction started. Simple, professional, safe. I turned south, started walking. That's when I found the second cabin. This one was different, newer. Maybe 1970s or 80s based on the construction. Cinder block foundation, metal roof, actual glass in the windows, though most of it was broken now. Someone had lived here, really lived here. There was a propane tank on the side, a well pump, the remains of a garden that had long since gone to seed. And the door was open, not hanging like the first cabin. Open. Recently opened. I could tell by the arc it had scraped through the dirt floor, a clean half circle that hadn't had time to fill back in. The humming was louder here, much louder. I should have run, but I heard something else under the humming. Something that sounded like a voice, weak, thready, like someone calling for help. I called out, "Hello? Is someone in there?" The humming stopped, just stopped, instantly, like a switch being thrown. And in the silence that followed, I heard it clearly, a woman's voice. "Please, please help me. I'm not a brave man. I need you to understand that. I'm not a hero. I don't watch horror movies because they give me nightmares. I sleep with a bathroom light on because complete darkness makes me anxious." But that voice, it sounded so human, so desperate, so real. I couldn't just leave. I pulled out my phone, hoping it might have somehow found a signal. Nothing. Dead. Useless. So I grabbed the heaviest thing I had, a steel survey stake, and I walked toward the door. The interior was dark. The windows faced the wrong direction to catch the noon sun, and the broken glass had let in years of debris. Leaves, branches, what looked like an old bird's nest in one corner. But someone had been here recently. I could see it. Fresh footprints in the dust, a cleared path from the door to a back room, cans of food stacked against one wall, beans, soup, peaches. The labels faded, but the cans themselves still intact. "Hello?" I called again. "Back here?" The voice was weaker now. "Please, I'm hurt. I can't move. The back room. I had to pass through the main space to reach it. Every step felt wrong. Every instinct screaming at me to turn around, get out, forget what I'd heard. But I kept walking. I reached the doorway to the back room. It was even darker here. No windows. Just a black rectangle that seemed to swallow my flashlight beam. "Where are you?" I asked. "Right here," the voice said. It came from directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty main room, the open front door, daylight streaming in from outside. But the voice had been close. So close I'd felt breath on my neck. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran like a child, dropped my survey stake, my clipboard, half my equipment, ran through that door, and didn't stop until I reached the clearing where my truck was parked. I fumbled my keys 3 times trying to unlock the door. And when I finally got inside, when I finally felt the engine turn over and heard that beautiful, normal, mechanical sound, I looked in my rearview mirror. Someone was standing at the edge of the clearing. A woman. She was too far away to make out features. Just a silhouette against the trees. Dark hair, pale skin, a dress that looked old. Wrong for the weather. She wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. I drove, didn't look back again. Didn't slow down until I hit asphalt. Didn't stop until I reached the gas station on the edge of Russellville with a payphone outside. I called the Holbrooks. No answer. I called the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, told them what I'd seen, the cabins, the footprints, the woman in the clearing. The deputy who took my statement was polite, professional, but I could hear it in his voice. He didn't believe me. "Probably just some transient," he said. "We get them sometimes. People living rough in the national forest wander onto private property. We'll send someone out to check." I gave him the coordinates, described the access road, told him about the carving on the door. He said they'd look into it. I drove home. 3 days later, I called the Holbrooks again. This time, someone answered. A man's voice. Not Walter Holbrook. I'd spoken to him once before, and this wasn't him. "Hello?" I said. "I'm trying to reach the Holbrook family. I'm the surveyor who was supposed to meet them last week." "They're not available." The voice was flat, monotone. "Do you know when they'll be back?" "I need to discuss the property survey. They're not available." Same words, same inflection, like a recording. "Who is this?" I asked. The line went silent. Not dead. Silent. I could hear breathing on the other end. Slow, steady, and underneath it, so faint I almost missed it. Humming. I hung up. I tried calling back twice. Both times it went straight to voicemail. Margaret Holbrook's cheerful voice asking me to leave a message. I left too. Neither was returned. I did some research after that. Couldn't help myself. The property the Holbrooks had purchased, it has a history. Not the kind of history that shows up in real estate disclosures. The kind you have to dig for. In 1951, a family named Garrett lived on that land. Father, mother, 3 children. They disappeared. All 5 of them. No bodies, no explanation, just gone one winter morning, their breakfast still on the table, their truck still in the yard. The sheriff at the time blamed drifters, said the family must have run afoul of someone passing through. But the neighbors had a different theory. See, the Garretts had built their home near a much older structure. A cabin that had been on that land since before Alabama was a state. Nobody knew who had built it, or why, or what had happened to them. But everyone knew the stories. Stories about sounds in the woods at night, humming that came from nowhere, people seeing figures between the trees that vanished when you looked directly at them. The Garretts had ignored the stories. They were practical people, religious people. They didn't believe in hauntings. Neither did I. I tried to forget about it. For 2 weeks, I threw myself into other jobs, told myself the Holbrooks had probably just gotten cold feet, changed their minds about the property, decided Alabama wasn't for them after all. But I kept having the dreams. The same dream, every night. I'm back in that second cabin, standing in the doorway to the back room. And the voice is calling to me. That weak, desperate voice asking for help. But in the dream, I don't run. In the dream, I step forward, into the darkness, and something is waiting there. Something that wears a woman's face like a mask. Something that opens its mouth too wide and makes a sound like humming and reaches for me with fingers that bend in too many places. I wake up before it touches me, every time, but the sound follows me out of sleep. That humming. I hear it in the quiet moments, when I'm falling asleep, when I'm alone in the woods on other surveys. It's getting louder. I finally called the Franklin County Sheriff again last week, asked about the welfare check, asked if they'd found anything on the Holbrook property. The deputy I spoke to, different guy this time, said they'd sent someone out. And? I asked. Nothing there. What do you mean nothing? I mean nothing. No cabins, no structures, no signs of habitation, just trees. I told him that was impossible. I told him about the cinder block foundation, the propane tank, the well pump. He told me I must have had the wrong coordinates. But I didn't. I know I didn't. The Holbrooks are still not answering their phone. I drove by their home address in Birmingham last Tuesday. The house is dark. Mail piling up on the porch. Car in the driveway with 2 weeks of leaves on the windshield. I didn't knock. I wanted to, but I could hear it, even from the sidewalk, even through the walls. Humming. So here's my warning. If you ever find yourself in Franklin County, if you ever take a job near Dismal's Canyon, if you ever hear that sound in the woods, run. Don't investigate. Don't be brave. Don't tell yourself there's a rational explanation. Just run, because whatever lives in those woods, it doesn't just want to be found. It wants to be followed. And once it has you, once you've heard its voice, I don't think it ever lets go. I still have nightmares. They're getting longer now. I make it farther into the dark room before I wake up. Last night, I saw what's in there, and this morning, when I looked in the mirror, my lips were moving. I wasn't speaking. I was humming. The third time I heard the bells, I knew they weren't coming from the church. They couldn't be, because the church had been abandoned for 40 years, and I had personally seen what was left of its bell tower. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Delia. I'm a historical preservationist, or I was until December of 2023. That's when the state sent me to document a property in Colbert County, Alabama. An old church called Hollows Chapel, built in 1874, slated for demolition the following spring. My job was simple. Photograph the structure, document any historical features, file a report recommending whether it qualified for the National Register. Routine work. I'd done dozens of these assessments. Old courthouses, plantation homes, one-room schoolhouses slowly returning to the earth. I'd never been afraid before. But I'd also never heard about the congregation. The drive to Hollows Chapel took me through some of the most remote territory I'd seen in 15 years of fieldwork. Past Tuscumbia, past Layton, down a county road that turned to gravel, then to dirt, then to something that barely qualified as a path. My phone lost signal about 40 minutes in. The trees pressed close on both sides, sweet gum and pine and old oaks draped in Spanish moss that shouldn't have been growing this far north. It looked like the kind of place that time forgot. Because it had. I found the church at the end of the road. If you could call it a church anymore. The structure had been white once. You could see traces of paint on the clapboard siding, flaking away like dead skin. The windows were gone. Just dark rectangles staring out at nothing. The steeple had collapsed decades ago. I could see where it had fallen, crushing the rear section of the building, and the front doors stood open, wide open, like someone was expecting me. I told myself that was ridiculous. The doors had probably been open for years. Vandals, weather, the slow surrender of wood to gravity and rot. I got out of my car, grabbed my camera, started documenting the exterior. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Now, I need to explain something about my work. Historical preservation attracts a certain kind of person, people who are comfortable with old things, with decay, with the weight of years pressing down on empty spaces. I've photographed rooms where people died, battlefields where thousands fell, hospitals where suffering soaked into the walls. None of that ever bothered me. But standing in front of Hollow's Chapel, with those dark windows staring down at me, I felt something I'd never felt on a job before. I felt unwelcome. The church records told a disturbing story. I'd pulled them from the county archive before making the trip. Standard research for any assessment. Birth records, death records, property transfers. Hollow's Chapel had been built by a man named Ezekiel Marsh in 1874. Former Confederate chaplain, came to Alabama after the war with a small group of followers and enough money to buy 200 acres of timberland. The congregation grew quickly. By 1880, nearly 200 people were attending services every Sunday. They'd built a school, a meeting hall, houses for families who wanted to live close to the church, a community. And then, in the winter of 1887, they all disappeared, every single one of them. 214 people, according to the census, gone. No explanation in the records, no investigation documented, just a hole where a community used to be. The county took possession of the land in 1890, sold it at auction. New owners never built anything, just let the forest take back what the forest had always owned. The church and a handful of structures remained standing through sheer stubbornness, but no one ever lived there again. And no one could tell me why. I started my documentation at the front of the building. The doors had been beautiful once, hand-carved oak with iron hardware that had rusted into abstract sculptures. Someone had put real craftsmanship into them. Above the lintel, barely visible under decades of grime, words had been carved. The congregation waits. I photographed it, told myself it was a common sentiment for a church. The faithful waiting for the return of Christ, standard 19th century religious language. But something about the phrasing bothered me. Not the congregation gathers or the congregation prays, waits, as if they were still in there, as if they'd never left. The interior was worse than the exterior. I stepped through those open doors into a darkness that seemed to resist my flashlight. The beam just stopped, like the air itself was absorbing the light. It took my eyes longer than it should have to adjust. When they did, I saw the pews, rows of them, dozens, stretching back into the gloom, all of them occupied. My heart stopped. For one terrible second, I thought I was looking at bodies, 200 corpses sitting in perfect rows, preserved by some accident of chemistry or climate. Then my eyes adjusted further, and I saw what was actually in the pews. Clothes, old clothes, arranged to look like people, dresses and suits and children's outfits stuffed with something, straw maybe, or old rags, and posed in sitting positions, dozens of them, maybe 100, each one facing forward toward the pulpit, toward the place where Reverend Marsh would have stood, waiting. I should have left then. I know that now. I knew it then, standing in that doorway with my flashlight trembling in my hand. But I'm a professional. And this was historically significant, unprecedented. I'd never seen anything like it in 15 years of field work. Someone had to document it. So I started taking pictures. The flash of my camera was almost blinding in that darkness. Each burst of light revealed more details, more wrongness. The clothes weren't arranged randomly. They were organized by size, adults in the front rows, children in the back, infants, or at least infant-sized bundles, clustered near the altar. And they all had faces, not real faces, drawn faces. Someone had taken white fabric and sketched features onto it, crude circles for eyes, curved lines for mouths, all of them smiling, all of them staring at nothing. The smell hit me about 10 rows in. I'd been so focused on the visual horror that I hadn't noticed it at first. But once I did, I couldn't ignore it. Not rot, not decay, something sweeter, more cloying, like flowers left too long in a vase, like perfume trying to cover something worse underneath. I gagged, covered my nose with my sleeve, kept documenting. The pulpit was different from the rest of the church, clean, well-maintained. The wood polished to a shine that seemed impossible in a building this far gone. And on the lectern, a book, bound in dark leather, No title on the spine or cover, just smooth, dark leather that looked almost warm. I reached for it. My fingers brushed the cover, and the humming started. You might think you know where this is going. You might think this is where I tell you about demons, about possession, about some evil force waking up because I disturbed its resting place. But it wasn't like that. The humming wasn't threatening. It was beautiful, soft, harmonious. Dozens of voices blending together in a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the floor, from the arranged figures in the pews. A hymn. I didn't recognize the melody, but something in me responded to it anyway. Something deep and primal that wanted nothing more than to close my eyes and let the sound wash over me. To join in. That's what scared me. Not the sound itself, but how much I wanted to be part of it. I pulled my hand back from the book. The humming stopped, instantly, completely, like it had never been there at all. I grabbed the book. I know, I shouldn't have. Historical Preservation 101. You don't remove artifacts from a site. You document them in place. You let the proper authorities handle extraction and conservation. But I needed to understand. I needed to know what had happened here. So I shoved the book into my bag and walked back through those rows of smiling faces and didn't look back. I made it halfway to my car before I realized I wasn't alone. Someone was standing at the edge of the tree line. A woman. She was maybe 50 feet away, too far to make out clearly, but I could see enough. Old dress, dark fabric, hair pulled back in a style that hadn't been fashionable in 100 years. And she was watching me, not moving, not speaking, just standing there with her hands clasped in front of her and her head slightly tilted, like she was curious about something. "Hello," I called. My voice came out weaker than I intended, scared. The woman didn't respond. "I'm with the State Historical Commission. I'm here to document the church. Is this your property?" Nothing. I took a step toward her. She took a step back, into the shadows, into the trees, and she was gone. I told myself she was probably just a local, someone who lived nearby and had come to see who was poking around the old church. Suspicious of strangers, maybe. Not used to visitors. Perfectly normal. But normal people don't dress like they stepped out of an 1880s photograph, and normal people don't vanish into thin air. I drove back to my motel in Tuscumbia. The book sat in my bag like a weight, like it was heavier than it should be. I didn't open it until after dark, until I'd locked the door and checked the windows and done all the little rituals we do when we're trying to convince ourselves we're safe. Then I sat on the bed and pulled it out, and I started to read. It was a journal. Reverend Ezekiel Marsh's private journal, based on the handwriting and the name inscribed on the first page. The entries started in 1875, about a year after the church was built. Mundane stuff at first, sermon notes, parish business, records of births and baptisms and deaths. But around 1880, the tone changed. "I have heard the voice again," Marsh wrote on October 14th of that year. "It speaks in the silence between heartbeats. It promises such things, such wonderful, terrible things, if only we will listen." The capital L was deliberate. He used it every time. Listening, that was what he called it. The entries got stranger after that. Marsh wrote about preparations, about the congregation readying itself, about teachings that he received in dreams and passed on during Sunday services. He never explained what these teachings were, but he described the effects. Brother Thomas no longer speaks except in hymn. He hums the melody constantly now, even in his sleep. He says it is the only way to keep the voice clear. Sister Martha has sewn the first of the vessels. She says more are needed, many more, one for each of us when the time comes. The children have stopped playing. They sit in the chapel for hours, listening. They say they can hear the voice more clearly than the adults. They say it sounds like their mothers. I read until 3 in the morning. I couldn't stop. It was like the words had hooks in them. The final entry was dated December 23rd, 1887. "Tonight we join the congregation. The vessels are prepared. The hymn has been sung. The voice has told us what must be done. We will not die. We will simply wait. Wait for others to find us. Wait for others to listen. Wait for the congregation to grow. The voice promises this is not an ending, it is a door, and we will hold it open. Forever. That was it. Nothing after, just blank pages stained with age and something that might have been water or might have been tears. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that motel room with all the lights on, reading and rereading those final entries, trying to make sense of what I'd found. A mass suicide seemed like the obvious answer. Marsh had led his congregation into some kind of cult ritual, convinced them to end their lives together, and their bodies had simply never been found. It wouldn't be unprecedented. The Jonestown Massacre. Heaven's Gate. History is full of charismatic leaders who convinced their followers to die for a promise, but something didn't fit. The bodies should have been there. 214 people don't just vanish. Even in the 1880s, even in the remote Alabama backcountry, someone would have found remains, evidence, something. And then there were the vessels, the clothes in the pews. One for each of us, Marsh had written. When the time comes, I should have turned the journal over to the authorities. I should have reported what I'd found and let historians and investigators figure out the truth. But I went back instead. I don't know why. That's not true. I know exactly why. Because I could still hear it, the humming. Even in my motel room, 2 hours from the church, I could hear it. Faint but persistent, like a radio playing in another room, and I needed to know where it was coming from. The next morning was overcast. Heavy clouds pressing down on the hills. The kind of weather that makes noon look like dusk. I drove back to Hollows Chapel in silence. No music, no podcasts. Just the hum of my tires on bad roads and that other humming underneath it all. Getting louder, getting closer. The church looked different in the gray light. Smaller somehow, more fragile, like it might collapse at any moment. But the doors were still open, and standing in front of them, waiting for me. The woman from the trees. She wasn't alone this time. There were others with her. A man in a dark suit, a child in a white dress, an elderly woman with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. All of them dressed in clothes from another century. All of them watching me with expressions of patient anticipation. All of them humming. I stopped my car, sat there with the engine running, told myself I could still leave, could still drive away and forget any of this had ever happened. But my hand was already on the door handle, and my legs were already carrying me toward them. "You read the book." The woman spoke first. Her voice was strange, layered somehow, like multiple people speaking in perfect unison. "We've been waiting for someone to read it." I tried to speak, to ask who they were, what they wanted, what the hell was happening. But my voice wouldn't work. The humming was inside me now, filling my head, drowning my thoughts. "The congregation needs new members," the woman said. "The voice needs new ears." She reached out her hand. "Join us, listen with us, wait with us." Her fingers were cold. So cold. I pulled away. Don't ask me how. The humming was so loud by then that I could barely think. Every instinct was telling me to take her hand, to step forward, to become part of something larger than myself. But something in me fought, something small and stubborn and terrified that wasn't ready to stop being Delia. I stumbled backward, fell, scrambled to my feet and ran for my car. Behind me, I heard them, not chasing, not shouting, just humming. Louder and louder, 100 voices, 1,000. I drove until my gas light came on, stopped at a station outside of Huntsville, sat in the parking lot with my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the pump. The humming had stopped, but I could still feel it, like a hole in my chest where the sound had been, like something missing. I never filed my report, never told the state what I found. I just stopped, quit my job, moved away, tried to build a new life in a new place. But it followed me. The bells started 3 months later. Church bells, ringing at 3 in the morning, ringing in a pattern that sounded almost like a hymn. At first, I thought I was imagining them. Then I thought it was a nearby church with a broken timer. Then I started seeing the woman, just glimpses, at the edge of parking lots, in windows of buildings I walked past, standing on corners that were empty when I looked directly at them, always watching, always waiting. The third time I heard the bells, that's when I knew, because the third time I hummed along, without meaning to, without wanting to. My lips moved of their own accord, and the melody was perfect. I've tried everything: therapy, medication, moving again and again. Nothing helps. The humming is getting louder. The bells are getting closer. And last week, I woke up in the middle of the night and found myself standing in front of my closet, pulling out clothes and arranging them on my bed, arranging them in the shape of a person. I don't think I have much time left. I can feel myself fading, becoming something else, something that wants to join the congregation, something that wants to listen. So I'm telling you this as a warning. If you ever find yourself in Colbert County, if you ever hear about a church called Hollows Chapel, if anyone ever offers you a book bound in dark leather, don't take it. Don't read it. Don't listen, because the congregation is real. They never died. They're still waiting. And once they choose you, once the voice decides you belong to them, there's nowhere you can run. There's nowhere you can hide. There's only the humming and the waiting and the door that they've been holding open for 130 years. A door that I can see now, right in front of me, opening. The humming is so beautiful. I understand that now. I understand everything now. I think I'm going to step through. I think I've been waiting for this my whole life. If you're hearing this, if this recording somehow reaches someone, please, don't come looking for me. Don't come looking for Hollows Chapel. Just know that the congregation is growing, one soul at a time, and we'll be waiting for you forever. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed, and some congregations never stop singing.